Welcome to Leading While Black, a legacy of transformational Black leadership at Tufts University. I'm Chris Manjapra, professor of history, here with my dear friend Katrina Moore, senior director of the Africana Center, and we have an enriching and exciting and an inspiring program planned. At this university, we are familiar with ways of thinking of the sources of our excellence. In those narratives, we have tended to overlook, however, even when not individually, then collectively and structurally, the fact that for 50 years, transformative, courageous visionaries from the Black community have devoted themselves to making this university what it is. This is a project in community storytelling, public history, and public art to help us all better recognize ourselves so we better understand what has made Tufts the great institution that it is. What are the legacies at Tufts that we need not only to uncover, but also to lift up so that Tufts can continue to reach its potential? As we ask these questions today, we also want to express solidarity with the over 20 HBCUs nationwide that have been repeatedly forced to close campus due to terrorizing bomb threats over the past 2 weeks of Black History Month. There is, of course, a larger context to our gathering today. All right, with that, I'm turning it over to Katrina.
I would also like to welcome you to our program today. And the Leading While Black initiative also presents an opportunity for us to explore our history and expand our thinking about the contributions of Black leaders at Tufts and correct the damaging falsehoods that we have been programmed to believe, that senior leadership at Tufts has historically not included exceptional Black people and that we weren't invited to join the table. No, as you will learn through this event, we were not only at the table, we expanded the table. The 8 luminaries we are highlighting today are a representative group of the many Black leaders who have contributed in mighty ways to changing Tufts University. We acknowledge that there have been many leaders than these 8. Their conversations that we'll have today will help us begin to lift up this legacy that has long been a foundational part of the university. This afternoon, we'll have 2 panel conversations. After the first panel, please stay tuned to meet Alonzo Nichols, our partner in bringing Leading While Black to you today, who will introduce a tour of the Leading While Black exhibition that just opened at Tisch Library on the Medford-Somerville campus, as well as the School of Medicine and Dental School on the Health Sciences campuses, and his interview with Bernie Harleston. Throughout the event, please add your memories, your comments, and your shout outs in the chat window. Okay, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Tony Monaco, Tufts' 13th president. Tony came to Tufts in 2011 after 2 decades as a faculty member and senior administrative leader at the University of Oxford. Dr. Monaco, who holds an MD and PhD, is a distinguished scientist in the area of genetics and neurodevelopmental disorders. As Tufts president, Tony is committed to excellence in teaching and research and to furthering the university's tradition of inspiring its students to become leaders in their professions and communities. Most recently, President Monaco has been a leader in defining higher education's role, supporting student and community needs in response to the COVID-19 public health crisis. Among the hallmarks of his tenure are his deep commitment to fostering a diverse and inclusive environment at Tufts, as well as a passionate focus on mental health and the well-being of the community. And now, please join me in welcoming President of Tufts University, Tony Monaco.
Thank you, Katrina. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to participate in Tufts' inaugural Leading While Black event, a celebration of Black and African-American leaders at our university. The event is an opportunity for all of us to uplift the legacy of Black leaders who have made significant contributions to Tufts throughout its history. The Leading While Black project builds on the foundation created by Professor Gerald Gill, who taught in the history department at Tufts for 27 years, starting in 1980. Professor Gill was celebrated for his commitment to community building, as well as his seminal work, Another Light on the Hill, an exhibit first staged in 1988 and staged twice more between 1988 and 2002, which revealed the history of the Black experience at Tufts. The spirit of that exhibit will continue to live on through a new display within the newly refurbished Coolidge Room in Ballou Hall, one of the more ceremonial spaces on campus. In a similar way, Leading While Black aims to reveal an important piece of public history by bringing together archival materials, oral histories, and telling the story of 8 leaders through art and conversation. Recognizing and celebrating the impact Black leaders have made and continue to make on our university is also an important part of our initiative to make Tufts an anti-racist institution. Higher education is at a pivotal point where we need to focus on increasing the diversity of staff and faculty and using our educational and research mission to reduce racial disparities and social injustice. I am convinced, and data shows, that higher education institutions like Tufts grow and thrive with higher rates of diversity within the academic enterprise across all categories of students, faculty, and staff. Our ability to innovate in the face of daunting societal challenges draws on that diversity of experience, background, and perspective to generate the most equitable solutions rather than solutions. Throughout highlighting the stories of these Black luminaries, we can both recognize the work that has already been done and identify areas for improvement so that Tufts can continue to work towards the goal of becoming an anti-racist institution. I'm now pleased to welcome our first 3 panelists and honorees for today. Each of them has played a significant role in shaping Tufts into the university it is today. Bobby Nabel, Dean of Students at the School of Arts and Sciences from 1980 to 2000. Beginning with the Africana Center and informed by her leadership and Tufts' commitment to admit and serve diverse student communities, Bobby Nabel was also instrumental in the establishment of the Identity Centers. Marilyn Glader, Associate Dean of the Faculty and Dean for Natural and Social Sciences at Arts and Sciences from 1994 to 1997, and Associate Dean of Liberal Arts and Jackson College at Arts and Sciences from 1990 to 1994. Marilyn Glader devoted herself to faculty development and to increasing faculty diversity and inclusiveness. She also started an initiative for outstanding first years designed to support and retain students from underrepresented groups in science, math, and engineering. And Lisa Coleman, Executive Director at the Office of Institutional Diversity from 2007 to 2009, and director of the Africana Center from 1999 to 2007. Lisa Coleman was committed to finding ways to support students and engage faculty, staff, and alumni. Among her many contributions were revamping the weekend orientation program for first-year students by introducing films such as Black Is, Black Ain't, and creating the first film series focused on diasporic Black cultures and intersectionality. Now, before I turn it over to Katrina to start the discussion, I want to take a moment to thank colleagues from the various offices who partnered closely to bring this day to fruition. It was a wonderful example of the spirit of collaboration, and I'm very grateful to colleagues from Advancement, the Provost's Office, University Communications and Marketing, Tufts Technology Services, and Digital Collections and Archives, and many more for making this wonderful project possible, including the staff from my own office. I want to especially thank Katrina, Chris, and Alonzo for your leadership and hard work planning and executing this project. Katrina, Tufts is fortunate to have a leader like you who is deeply committed to supporting our underrepresented and minority students to help them thrive both at Tufts and beyond. As director of the Africana Center, your contributions to the Black experience at Tufts not only benefit our community today, but will continue to impact the university many generations to come. I am truly grateful for everything you do for Tufts, what you've done for me, and you deserve to be celebrated alongside the other leaders we are honoring today. With that, I now turn it over to you, Katrina, to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, President Monaco. And for those of you who know me well, you know I will cry on a dime. So I'm trying to hold it together right now because I wasn't expecting that. So thank you so much. I'm just so delighted to start this first panel conversation, walking with the community, and to be able to be in communion with Bobby, Marilyn, and Lisa to explore the contributions of Black administrators to community-led transformation at Tufts. I was just reflecting back, Lisa, on when I first came to Tufts and met you, and how much support you were for me to make the transition to be the director of the center. And so I'm just so happy to see all of you this morning. Throughout our time together in this conversation, we will give special attention to the recollections and working with the late and beloved Professor Gerald Gill. And we can't start this conversation without talking about the contributions of Dean Bernie Harleston. So the beginning of this change started with Dean Harleston, who was the Dean of the Faculty in 1970. Among his many accomplishments was the first cluster hire of faculty of color, which brought Gerald Gill to history, Marilyn to political science, Bobby to the English department, Daniel Brown to languages and literature, and Pearl Robinson, who's still on campus today, to the political science department. And learning from his example and your examples, we continue to make and remake this community every day with every interaction, with every engagement, and our continued presence on this campus. If there's something we want in our community, then we make that happen by how we interact. But this all took time, and it took a lot of effort. Times were really different when you first arrived at Tufts. So can you talk to us about what it was like for you when you arrived here? Who wants?
That's for me?
Either
Okay.
whoever wants to start.
Okay, I'll take the opportunity. When my son was 2 years old, I decided to go back to work. And my next door neighbor, who worked for Tufts, suggested I apply for a position in the Jackson College administrative office. To my surprise, my application was forwarded to Dean Bernard Harleston, who interviewed me and offered me a position in the English department to oversee a new freshman English course. In 1966, Tufts was among the first colleges to actively recruit Black students. When it was discovered that the freshman writing program didn't meet the needs of some of those students, the experimental college was asked to develop the course that I was hired to teach in 1970. X College, established in 1964, was one of the many innovations at Tufts under Dean Harleston's leadership. And it offered courses not covered in the regular curriculum, which were proposed and taught by administrators, community members, and students. Dean Harleston believed that increased diversity, not only in race, but in gender, class, and age, enhanced the educational experience for all students. And a number of programs were initiated to make Tufts more accessible to those not then widely served. I'd like to mention a number of those and what they are doing now to help us achieve this. First, there was the African American Center, or not quite first, but almost first. The African American Center, now the Africana Center, was established in 1969. The Asian American Center, Hispanic, now Latinx centers, the LGBT and women's centers were added in subsequent years, joining the International Center, which was already in existence. Jackson College, for a long time, had been a smaller institution than the male equivalent. But under Dean Harleston, the number of admissions for female students was increased to equal those of male students. And in 1970, a continuing education program for women over 24 years old began, and it is now open to men. In addition, a daycare center was opened. This was the Tufts I entered in 1970 as it was redefining itself, and I felt very welcome and a part of it. I enrolled my son in the newly opened daycare center, where I met a white member of the English department. Concerned about the long days at the center, we both agreed to keep our 2-year-old sons at the center for mornings and share the cost of afternoon care at the other faculty members' home on campus. His family and mine became friends. That was my introduction to Tufts, and it couldn't have been better and more satisfying.
Lisa Macklin.
Okay, I'll go next. So I arrived at Tufts in 1974. I had not been in Boston for very long. I arrived at Tufts campus and joined the political science department on a part-time basis. And the first thing I found out was that faculty meetings for the department were held sporadically when the chair of the department looked up and down the hall and saw that all doors were open. In addition to that fact, all the faculty members were white males. There were no women, no people of color. They were perfectly welcoming, but they didn't do things in a way that worked for somebody who had a small child at home and had to arrange childcare. The good news was that the then chair of the department, Frank Colcord, who later became a dean, when I told him that was the problem, I had to have a little predictability for these meetings. He said, "Oh, fine, we'll have them on," and he rescheduled. It was not a big deal. A couple of years later, Pearl Robinson, who studies African and African American politics, joined the department. So there was a second woman and a second African American woman one of the things that happened was that gradually I began to meet faculty from other departments. There was T.J. Anderson, African-American head of the music department, who was probably the only other African-American faculty member when I arrived, other than Dean Harleston. Dean Harleston was always quite accessible and paid attention to what went on in departments, and in quiet ways, I think, supported efforts within, certainly in my department, to increase the diversity there. So that was my arrival. Lisa?
My arrival was 1999, so fast forward a few years, and so I was a freshly minted PhD coming into Tufts. And what I like to say here is that I wouldn't have been able to come to Tufts without the legacy. So I'm so glad about talking about Bernie Harleston. And then, of course, I wouldn't have been able to be at Tufts without Bobby Nabel and Marilyn Glader. They were part of the recruitment team that brought me to Tufts. I always say that I wouldn't have come if I hadn't met them, probably. So that's absolutely true. And so I like to say that I was part of a wraparound. Gerald, Bobby, Pearl, Marilyn, they were there. They were there to bring me in, to show me the ropes, as it were. And then there had been another round of hiring, another round after that. So there was Keith, Chip, Christina Sharp. So that round, and I came in a year after that round of hiring had taken place. And so as I think about what was happening when I arrived, I came from New York. It was a very challenging time at Tufts. I came in 1999, as was mentioned. That was my transition year. I spent a year transitioning in. And as a result, there had been a protest in 1997, and that protest had left a lot of feelings across the institution. Some people will remember this protest. The students can be very creative, so they painted tombstones and of all of the faculty of African descent who had left, and senior administrators who had left the institution, and put their names on tombstones and planted them outside of Ballou Hall. This was prior to my arrival. There was a two and a half year period of an interim director. Denise Phillips had been working there, and she had a lot of the historical knowledge. I also like to recognize Patricia Hill Collins, Jewel Bell, and Anita Howard, all of whom laid the paths for me to be the Africana Center director. I found the papers from Patricia Hill Collins in the basement where she wrote Black Feminist Thought. So I say this legacy, and I entered into an institution that had been very masculinist, as Bobby and Marilyn sort of alluded to. And so there was a recentering in terms of gender as well. And I think that was very much about that legacy of Bobby, Marilyn, Jewel, Patricia, and Jewel, of course, is the late wife of Derek Bell. The school had an identity problem similar to what Bobby talked about. It was reimagining itself. We had a president that was stepping down, and there was going to be a new president appointed and a new provost. The identity problem would be then reshaped as the Africana Center was reshaped. And there was a real need to reimagine what Blackness was going to look like in the alumni constituency group, as well as for the students. And I became the leader I am, I think, because there was a lot of open space. When you have demands, you can meet those demands, but you can also exceed them and think about how you imagine, innovate, and reimagine spaces for students. And that is what I tried to do. I am very thankful, I just want to say again, to all of the leadership that paved the way for me to be able to do that. And I'll talk a little bit later about renaming the Africana Center from the African American Center, Bobby, because that was also part of the project that we engaged in, as you know.
And that's one of the things that I'm really grateful that you took care of before my arrival. So thank you, Lisa. Yes, and the remarkable thing now is if you came to our campus now, every day that I'm on campus, I see more and more students of color walking around, and it's just really an indication of the changes that have happened since you were here. But the needs of our students have dramatically changed over time as well. Today, there's a great need for us to address the mental health and well-being of our students, to deal with their issues around food insecurity and the issues of discrimination and bias. I'm sure, Lisa, that you are, a lot of the issues that I work on look similar to what you were focused on when you were here. But can you talk a little more about what the main student needs were during your time, and how did you respond to them?
Well, the first was some healing had to take place, right? Some healing had to take place post the protests, post the, Denise Phillips had experienced something like 5 directors in 7 years when I arrived, including interim directors. So there was healing that needed to take place across the community. So the first was to really, the outreach, to really make myself available to hear from the students, the faculty, the staff, the administrators. And so I went about that process, listening sessions, figuring it out. I think the 3 things that I'm really invested in, and it came to bear upon the work, when we think about it, I always ask, what's the bottom line in higher education? When you ask that line in corporate America, they know. When we ask that, we say that in higher education, we don't always know. And what we do is teaching, research, and knowledge production. And so when I think about that integration with the students, a lot of that was, there were gap areas there, right? The co-curricular programs and the relationship to faculty and academic work, the research undergirding some of the work of our students to make sure that they were receiving the kinds of fellowships and scholarships and academic to align with their academic promise. And so I think there were a lot of things, a lot of gap areas that we had to address. So that was the first, listening, addressing the gap areas, and then really thinking about how would we expand the demands, quote unquote, that have been presented. So we redid a lot of things. Tony Monaco mentioned a few of the things of redoing the orientation programs. One of the reasons I redid the orientation program early on was I invited faculty and staff to come to the orientation program. Prior to that, it had just been sort of the director and the peer leaders and the students. But what I wanted the students to see was faculty and staff outside of the classroom, in environments where they could have conversations with faculty, learn from them in different ways, and also humanize our faculty and staff, right? Because students often don't see some of us as not quite human. So
Right.
to figure out how to really make that work as well. And then, of course, we changed a lot of policies. And of course, as I talked about earlier, we changed the name of the Africana Center. So that I have to say, and again, I have to thank a lot of people here today for that, because that took a community, as they say, it takes a village. And we did surveys, we did focus groups, et cetera. And there were some resistors, right? But I want to thank again some of the people that we've already mentioned, people like Dan Brown and Gerald Gill, and of course, Bobby and Marilyn and others, who really helped to shepherd that work. And I think one of the things that I did early on was I did a survey to figure out when we talked about Blackness, who were we talking about? And I realized that we had a diasporic representation on campus, but we wanted to stay committed to those deep roots of African Americanness, given the struggles of African Americans. And so to make that part of the foundation, but to also recognize where we were in the moment. And the last thing that I was really happy that we were able to do is to really recenter the research, but also recenter alums. The alumni connections, and I worked with, and I'm still in touch with some of the people from the alumni office from way back then. Tim and some other people, we're still connected.
Yeah.
But that was because, remember, I came in during protests. So those students who just graduated were alums. And so they had deep investments in the institution. And I wanted to make sure that that student alumni connection, and we could use it for not just because of that, but also for mentorship to grow and expand how students could see themselves in the world. And so I hope that we were able to help students to reimagine what it meant to be a student leader, to reinvest in knowledge production, to open up knowledge production and research, and also through the kinds of teaching and work that we were able to do.
Thank you, Lisa.
So my work was with students in the classroom as a faculty member, but later on as a dean, my main work was with faculty. And one of my recurring comments was that we needed to do more to prepare the people who dealt with students rather than overemphasizing students' needs academically in any case. And that was, frankly, the thing that I failed at. It's very hard to change a culture. And Tufts was not different from other places in this, but it's very hard to change the larger culture where, for example, students would be, two students were sitting outside my office, and the assumption of other colleagues was that the person who was doing the tutoring and the person who was being tutored for some kind of deficiency were racially determined. They couldn't get their heads around the fact that the African-American student was the tutor and the white student was the one who was learning. So these kinds of things were hard to deal with. People who were very well-intentioned had a hard time wrapping their heads around the fact that they might be, if not part of the problem, they were failing to be part of the cure.
Yeah.
We did succeed in increasing, I think, Black faculty during the time that we were deans. This was not all the doing of Black faculty. Obviously, there were others. We didn't have terms. I don't think we even had terms like white allies at that point, but there were faculty. There was a dean of faculty before me, Mariella Feinlieb, who was a biologist, did not particularly, I think, know about women's studies, which was then emerging, didn't particularly know about African-American studies, but she was open to it. She allowed us to set up summer workshops for faculty so they could become more proficient in these kinds of areas. And that happened a lot of times. There were other people who joined us in doing these things.
Okay. Bobby, did you want to add anything?
I would like to. Actually, I'd like to start with something that happened when I was Dean of Students rather than when I first came. And it was a Black woman student coming to my office. And she sat down and I asked her what she wanted to talk about. And she said, I asked her if she were having difficulty in courses or something. And she said, no, my courses are going. There's nothing that's going wrong. And she said, my preparation was good. I was used to being in environments that were predominantly white before I came to Tufts. And so it's surprising, and at this point she was very close to tears. She says, it's surprising that I'm finding it really difficult. And she said, I wouldn't have predicted that. I was looking forward to this experience. And she said, but what I realized now was that I forgot that I wouldn't be coming home every night. And so it was that realization which sort of gave a clue to what we have to do outside the classroom to make it possible for our students to have a good educational experience. They need recognition of and respect for their individual identity without being deprived of a sense of belonging on campus. So they need to be who they are and feel that that is an important part of their being at Tufts. They need to have access to academic and non-academic faculty and staff to be comfortable seeking contact with them and to the other counseling and other support services. They also need advice about making decisions among the available choices that a lot of them may never have conceived of their being, and to know that the resources on campus were available to them and readily accessible to them.
Can I add, are you done?
Sure.
Yep. Please do.
Add to that one of the things that Bobby Nabel and Professor Paula Amer from the sociology department did was organize a series of weekend retreats for Black female graduate students. And this came about because there was a graduate student who worked in my dean's office as a student worker, who was a graduate student in literature, I think. And at the same time, I had a daughter who was a graduate student in science in another institution. And I began hearing some of the same things from them. Now, remember, in those days, we did not have words like microaggression. We didn't have words like self-care and those kinds of things. So we convened these young women who named themselves the WOWs, Wonderful Outstanding Women was the name of the group. We took them off on a couple of weekend retreats, which were amazing. We started by having the elders, that's Dean Nabel, and we were younger then, but we were the elders. Dean Nabel and Paula Amer, who grew up in the Caribbean, so had a slightly different perspective. And we went off with these young women. We had many planning women's with several of them, and then had these weekends. The elders thought we would start the first evening by talking about our educational paths, which we did. And we thought that would take an hour. And I think it took, what was it, Bobby? 3 or 4 hours? Because the young women wanted to know more and more about what we had dealt with. And the second thing that was surprising to us was that we thought we were going to talk about, okay, this is how you choose a PhD advisor. This is how you do this. And they said, no, we know how to do all that stuff. Or this is how you improve your study skills. No, we don't need all of that. What we need is figuring out how better to get through the day. And what they were talking about was what we would now call things like microaggressions, people's assumptions about them and their abilities, those kinds of things. So we spent the next 2 days doing many things related to those topics. And it's about it. This spring, it'll be 20 years since we had those meetings, and our hope is that we'll reconvene some of them. All of them that we've kept up with anyway, have gone on to do all sorts of great things. They're faculty members and administrators elsewhere. So we're very proud of them, but I think they still remember this is pivotal because they could support each other. And
it was pivotal. I was invited into the WOW. Yes. It was pivotal.
Well, we tried this past October, we had a luncheon with the Black women who are in leadership positions at Tufts. And it was our way of welcoming some of our newer colleagues who just joined Tufts. And we had such a great time being together. And before it was over, they were asking, when are we going to do this again, Katrina? So I think that we have a version of WOW that we are trying to keep going. So I just wanted to be sure that you knew that. And the other thing that I really wanted to make sure that all of you know that that we have moved the needle in that our TCU Senate president we have our first Black female TCU Senate president, Ama Ajay, who is doing some phenomenal work on campus this year. And so I just wanted to make sure that you know that we are still out there working and making things happen. But before we run out of time, I want to spend as much time as we can to talk about the work of Professor Gerald Gill, who showed us what it meant to walk with the community, to be present every day and all corners of the campus. In 1990, we had Black leaders like you who embodied this type of leadership that was not from the top down, but from the ground up. You were all walking with the community. And we know that I've been told, I did not have the fortune to meet Gerald, but we know that he was such a strong influence at Tufts, and he would be so happy and fulfilled that we have picked up the threads that he left for us that was part of his research. His legacy is so vibrant and is with us in this whole process. So just let me ask you, what are your memories of working with Gerald Gill? Gerald Gill was what to you?
Well, I worked in Blue across from where Gerald worked, and I saw him many, many times out my window as he was crossing campus. And on those times, he was almost always accompanied by a student, either a white student or a Black student. So there was this feeling that people sought him out, and particularly students sought him out because he recognized them, because he cared about them. And each time I thought about how much he embodied the educational experience that we at Tufts value for our students. And I think that a challenging classroom experience and evidence that you have an individual identity for faculty members as well outside of class was important for our students. And I think that he exemplified that in every way.
People tell stories about the fact that Gerald had a phenomenal memory for names. He knew the names of all the students, all the faculty, the workers in the cafeteria, and every place you went, he knew them and would say hello, hello to them. One of his assignments in his course on African American history was, or maybe more specifically on the civil rights movement, was that he assigned his students to interview people who had been alive during the civil rights movement, meaning us elders mostly. And one part of the assignment was that they had to interview somebody who was of a different race from them, who also had some memories of the civil rights movement. Now, given that there were not lots of Black faculty members, one of the things he did out of consideration for Black faculty members was to ration us. So students, you know, in any given semester, I could only be interviewed by 3 people. Pearl Robinson could only be interviewed by 3 or whatever. And I used to tell Gerald that he knew more about my history than probably anybody because he read all these interviews that his students did. And one of the things that he would not joke with me about, but mention was that, I had yet another student tell me about the fact that when you went on a civil rights march in Maryland, you were spat on by a 4-year-old. And this was something that always stood out in students' minds. The other thing about Gerald was somebody's probably mentioned how much he dealt with Tufts history, not just Blacks at Tufts, but also the local community. He was very involved in having the former slave quarters. I guess they're a historical site now, right? And the other thing he did was personal things that would not show up anyplace else. At one point, my son was working at the Washington Post as an intern writer. And every day I would get in campus mail a copy of his columns because Gerald subscribed to the Washington Post, which I did not. What else did he do? We went on a couple of demonstrations. Again, this is ancient history, but we demonstrated at a place that sold cougar rams. This is before South Africa apartheid was overthrown. So I was there once with my mother, and who was visiting, and Gerald came and joined the demonstration. He walked up to my mother and knew her by name. Her name was not the same as mine. He knew her by name and was part of the demonstration with us. Let's see, was there another thing? Yeah.
It sounds like he had boundless energy, and I to this day, there are still people on campus who, if you mention his name, they get emotional. And I miss that I did not have that experience. But Lisa, I know that he was a very strong supporter of the Africana Center. And we actually still have a snippet of an exhibition that he did that I refuse to take down,
Yes.
that he used to show students that we talk about him. We have a room dedicated to him, the Gerald Gill Reading Room, and his portrait is in that room. So I get to go in and talk to him every time I go in there. And so what was it really like to have that kind of support
It was
during.
tremendous. It was a tremendous, I've talked about the support that I had, the wraparound, and working with Gerald he was a mentor. He's a deep historian, as has been mentioned, and the Light on the Hill exhibition, which we housed for a number of years, even as he was building that exhibition to get it prepared for the campus. So he really was someone who, for me, even going back to the renaming of the center, encouraging that kind of innovation and forward thinking to think about where we were. That's that deep historical knowledge, but where we wanted to go. And that's to go back to what Bobby was saying, sort of embodying what you might imagine, right, with the students and thinking. He was a curious man and a learner. And to go back to what Marilyn was talking about, he changed his syllabus every semester. Right? He would work really hard and read new materials and introduce new materials to really meet students and meet with new ideas. He loved music. He would listen to old music and new music. We went to music concerts together. He would come to the Africana Center just to hang out. I would walk out of the door and Gerald would be sitting there doing something, as people have mentioned, with students. He also he had there are all these terms about radical empathy and compassion in the work that I do. He had that long before those terms were ever mentioned, that kind of radical empathy in action, in engagement. One of the things that we worked on together was the junior faculty program, right? Promoting junior faculty. He was deeply invested, and he would come to all of the programs with junior faculty and just talk and listen and hear about new and emerging ideas. This idea of co-creation and co-learning. And I also deeply want to say, as a woman, as a emerging young leader, he was so supportive of my ideas. Gerald died the year that I would become the executive director and the inaugural sort of chief diversity officer. But I had conversations with him about what that was going to look like. Should I do it? What was a diversity job? I mean, at that point, there were like a handful. So what was this going to look like? And he talked about some of the work we had done together as people came on this. We'd done work with the vet school, nutrition school, engineering school, the NSF, all of these programs, all these things that he had been invested in because of his learning and curiosity across fields. And so I think that what Gerald brought was what was also needed, was a kind of stability and longevity. And so I'm sure, and that legacy leads today. And we were able to establish the Gerald Gill Award. And so as I think about all of the things, all of the legacies that he's left, both inside Tufts and then outside, even the work he did with the Boston historical communities, we are better for it. And of course, we build on that work to this day. So I'm glad to hear, Katrina. I know about the reading room and I know about the way you've expanded that work over the years. So congratulations to you all. And I still hear from alums who still talk about Gerald and the influence of his legacy.
Yeah. Bobby, did you want to add any more?
No, other than the fact that I think we were blessed and we should continue to be grateful.
True. Okay. I just want to sit in this moment of just thinking about Gerald and the legacy that he has left us. But we need to move on. Today, COVID-19's dealt us a blow to our mental health and well-being. And there doesn't seem to be an end to the issues that threatened our being able to enjoy life to the fullest. We talk to students all the time about celebrating Black joy, finding that Black joy, and making the time to include rest and self-reflection in their daily routines to combat the effects of living day to day in a racist society. So I wanted to just ask you, what did self-care and resilience look like for you while you served at Tufts? And what are the things that you would share that you are doing today to help preserve yourself? Because we know that this work is hard and it takes a lot out of us. And so can you just talk about what self-care and resilience looks like for you?
Alonzo would be very upset if I didn't tell you about the Soul Sisters soirees. This was consisted of Black faculty and administrators who went to the home of Rebecca Flewelling, who was then the assistant to the president, who was and is a fantastic cook. We would show up at her house on a Sunday afternoon where she would serve us fried chicken, collard greens, biscuits to die for, peach cobbler, I can't remember what else. And my favorite story, and Alonzo's favorite story, is about how my daughter at the age of about 10 had to write an essay for school describing something. She wrote an essay describing Soul Sisters soiree. And what she did, because she was a kid, she just said what happened, and she didn't judge it. She just wrote, yes, they ate and they laughed, they loosened their belts, they lay down on the floor, and they giggled. So that was the in-community kinds of things are very helpful.
I'll pick up
The
there.
other, can I say one more that Bobby will remember particularly? There was also after hours. So I think the door to the administration building to Blue Hall was locked at 5 or 6 o'clock. Well, one of my most illuminating experiences there was watching then Associate Dean Liz Tupin teach us the hula. She was very good at it, and I certainly wasn't able to learn it, but it was another of the communal activities that was very invigorating. Go ahead, Lisa, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't realize you weren't finished, Marilyn. I was just going to pick up because, well, we picked up on the parties for sure. I would host for the next generation of hires. We would have a series of events, and I too love to cook, so we would have those. Alonzo will remember some of the spades games at the orientation program. So after all the students had gone to sleep, then the adults would stay up and play spades and bid whist and some other things. It was a community bonding activities that were very, very important, as Alonzo may remember, and which would then sometimes be expanded to my house later if we needed to continue the conversations and the spades games. We was again centering community. We changed the picnic at the beginning of the year. So we opened up the picnic so that everyone would come and made it a big event for the entire university. And one of the things that I still do, and I really, I have mentors who are 16 and 12. And so I still like to go on walks. So I would like to go on walks with the students. I learned that from Gerald. He would go on those walks. And so I started picking that up. It also helps you keep in shape a little bit and gets your mind active. So that's not so bad. And I'm a big gardener. And so one of the things I love to do is garden, and then of course grow my own food. I even grow it here in New York. I have broccoli growing out on the balcony. My friends make fun of me. They're like, really, you've got collard greens and broccoli out there? Because no, everyone needs some good collard greens in their life. And I'm a learner, so I'm learning to fly. I'm taking those flight lessons right now. And that keeps me resilient and also sort of thinking about how to stay a learner. If I think about Bobby and Marilyn and Gerald and Pearl, they stayed learners, stayed engaged. And so that's what I'm trying to do and create my life that way. And I get to do that with a lot of really great students across an incredible number of institutions, particularly at Tufts, where I was able to work.
Okay.
Well, from 1972, my office was located in Ballou, and the staff there remained fairly constant over the years. We had different responsibilities, but we were colleagues. And we seemed to agree that we had a common task to be readily accessible to students and to provide whatever assistance we could to help them succeed at Tufts. This made working in that environment both productive and enjoyable. And so I was always glad to have that. What Marilyn says about the Soul Sisters was absolutely true. And it was a time of being able to be who you were without editing. And it was something I look forward to greatly. Also, something about my work experience at Tufts meant that I worked with people for a long time, and a lot of those associations have lasted past the time of my retirement. So I've been away from Tufts now for 22 years. And yet there are still people that I see and love seeing, and we talk about current things, not so much about Tufts. One of the things, though, in particular, and a particular friendship for me at Tufts, was the one that I got to have with Marilyn, and through Marilyn, with her daughter, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth has become, for me, the daughter that I don't have. I have a wonderful son, but Elizabeth, speaking of the things that went on in Ballou that had not too much to do with education, Elizabeth would come sometimes. I remember a session in which she was learning to do makeup. And so I bought some things from my collection, which of course were not really appropriate for her since we differed very much in color. But she tried bringing some things of her own, and we used those and did a little session in my office in Ballou.
But you should say this was for theater purposes. This was not just for, regular life. Elizabeth is probably watching, and we are both going to be in a lot of trouble.
That's okay, yes. Tell her that as an old person, my memories are not really reliable. So at any rate, so I have much that lasted after Tufts, which has made my life very enjoyable in this period of time.
We also have a reading group that includes quite a few people from Tufts, all of whom are now retired, some more recently than Bobby and me.
This is really wonderful that there's still that connection. I can tell you that my interactions with alumni, even back from the 70s, is very strong, and that connection that they have is still strong. And we had this wonderful 50th anniversary celebration now 3 years ago. But just the knowing that the community that you were building while you were at Tufts is still vibrant, and we are still trying our very best to make that connection with our students as well as our alum. I'm always telling the students that I try to recreate a HBCU experience for them, because I went through that, and the level of support that I received, I try very hard to instill that in the work that we're doing today. We have a few more minutes, and so I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you would want to leave with us that would help us as we are continuing to move this needle forward, and in the context of the world and the country that we are living in today. What advice or words of comfort really can you leave with us that we can still be able to do this work amidst all of the challenges and still be a vibrant community?
I live my life by 3 quotes, Katrina, and these are 3 quotes by 3 Black people. And so I'm just going to tell you what they are. And this helps me to continue on. James Baldwin, the world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as it was when you came in. Janetta B. Cole, who's a dear friend of mine. Faced with what it seems like an impossible task, a group of folks will do well to remember the African proverb, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. What you give ought to be in direct relationship to what you received. If you have been blessed with a great deal, then you have a lot of giving to do. And lastly, from a Tufts graduate, Tracy Chapman, got to throw a little music in there. I'll toss my coins in the fountain, look for clovers in grassy lawns, searching for the shooting stars in the night, crossing my fingers and dream on, end quote. We have to dream, imagine possibilities that are beyond what we are today. And remember that people like Baldwin, Cole, Marilyn Glader, Bobby, Gerald, paved ways for us to do amazing things today and next and tomorrow.
Thank you, Lisa.
That's a hard one to follow, Lisa, but I think it's important to say that we should see all the processes as ongoing. It's continuous and don't expect it to end. And that's not bad. The process is part of it and the goal is still there, and that you can have fun doing it.
I also do want us to say to people who come afterwards that some of the things that seem very hard and were hard have resulted in changes that have benefited not only us, but those who come after us. So that if they can keep in mind that what they do lasts longer than the time it takes for it to be done, and use that as an incentive to use their skills and their caring to try to make things better, we will all benefit.
And Katrina, can I just say thank you to you for moving away from Black deficit, Black patronage and savior to Black joy, and really emphasizing and bringing us together in this space. And to you too, Chris. Thank you for this emphasis. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I could just sit and talk with you all day. This has been very inspiring for me, and I'm sure for our audience, for those who are watching us online, as well as we have people who are in the building doing a watch party, because we really wanted to provide as much community building as possible. So this has really meant a lot to me, and I really want to thank you for paving the way in what must have been really difficult times. The country was at a different spot than we are today, and we appreciate you. And I'm so happy that we were able to share this time with you. So we're going to move now to introducing to you. Yes, thank you so much. I just want to just hug all of you. So I give you a big Wakanda hug. But we do need to move forward. And I'd like to introduce you to another leader, Alonzo Nichols, who is our chief of photography at Tufts. He's captured the life of Tufts for the past 11 years. I just love the way that he's able to capture the life and the vibrancy of students and faculty staff at Tufts and on all the campuses. But I'm so in awe of the work that he did in the video profiles of you. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Alonzo for his amazing work. But I also want to thank all of you luminaries, because the level of sharing that you put into those videos made it come to life, and just, it's an amazing experience. And so I'm encouraging everyone, if you have the opportunity, to please come to campus and take a look at that installation that Alonzo is now going to talk to you about. Thank you so much, panel. And I look forward to continuing to be encouraged and supported by you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to introduce the exhibition video installation, perhaps by talking a bit about Professor Gerald Gill. I was fortunate enough to take some of those walks with Professor Gill, and it was at that time that his value for community, his investment in history, became part of my relationship to this Tufts community. And so when I think about the archival exhibition, I think about this endeavor as a co-creation of many hands, and I'm fortunate to play a role in this process, but I do recognize it as a collective endeavor. And when I think about the installation, I think about it as our most current investment in research and the production of knowledge about who we are as a community, and a way for us to connect that research and production of knowledge to moving forward and realizing an institution that lives up to the higher principles that we're all invested in. And so it's my pleasure to introduce this video that will give you some sense of the physical installation at Tisch Library, some of the work that went into producing it, and hopefully will serve as a point of departure for you to go and experience it for yourselves. Thank you.
Leadership is what makes our spaces or institutions what they are. There's an enormous amount of history that's just unknown. How can we make that information accessible but exciting? Eight figures were identified as people who have had significant impact, who are no longer here at Tufts.
These are really people who made a direct impact on the history of the university, who haven't necessarily been celebrated, and people who made Tufts what it is today.
I was excited to help produce this and sort of thinking about how can we take all the amazing material from the archives and present it in a way that felt a little bit more permanent, a little bit more robust, and a little bit more exciting that can tell a narrative. We designed an introductory panel that is much more graphic in terms of an introductory space that is, painted a different color than the rest of the library, and then has the portraits of each of our 8 figures. And we worked very hard to make a strong visual impact, thinking about people who are walking through a space, how do we stop them? We hang a lot of our collection in the library because it's one of the central nodes of the campus here. It's a space where students are, where faculty are. The idea is that, folks will be coming in and out of this hallway a lot over the course of the semester. People spend a lot of time here. It's a great time for looking and thinking and learning.
We really wanted this exhibition to have a really strong visual presence. We thought it would be most effective if people encountered this as they were going about their lives, if they feel like they're in the presence of these influential people. On the main floor of one of the busiest buildings on campus was really a great place to do it. Art can have a really profound impact on people's sense of inclusion and belonging.
We were looking at what does representation look like on campus through our art collection. When you actually count what portraits were on view, we had about maybe 50 portraits of historical folks here at Tufts. Everybody was white, and there's only one woman. So not very representative of what our community looks like today. So thinking about how can we design our spaces to sort of convey the history as it really is, not just how it was once written. How do we update this narrative to make people feel included and actually to tell the more accurate story of what the university is really made up of? These are key leaders who shaped where we are, but then it allows us to look for who will our future leaders be and how will they be able to change what the university is able to do.
It's gratifying to see the level of interest in Tufts past. I think that's been one of the great things about this project. There's a real sense of wanting to know where Tufts has come from and use the past to help us make better decisions in the future.
We're about to watch a video recording of Dr. Bernie Harleston, and I'd like to introduce that video by saying, firstly, that it was such a privilege to interview all of our honorees for this project. I think it's one of the definitive highlights of my career as a visual professional here. I think it's so important to hear from these individuals who've had such an important impact on the development of this institution. And to go back to Dr. Harleston, is fundamental because, in the words of Lisa Coleman, so many of us would not be here without the work of Dr. Harleston. He paved the way for us to realize institutional changes by changing the shape and the structures of the institution that begot wider changes that we've all bonded and created community around. And so with that, I'd like to introduce this video of Dr. Bernie Harleston's remarks, and thank you.
While I was near the end of my PhD program, there was an announcement for a job opening. Everybody's looking at these positions, and one place that had announced a job opening was Tufts. I knew Tufts just because I knew New England. And I went to the meetings, and it was an eye-opener. There was an older graduate student who was at Tufts, and he pulled me in. There was so many people, I was almost a little bored, but he pulled me in and made certain I stayed there through that process. And that all culminated in I being offered the position, which I took. Just prior to being offered the position, I had lunch with the chairman of the Board of Trustees at that time. And that was a very telling experience. He asked more generally how I felt about teaching and about students and that kind of stuff. But I think it was just to get to know me. And that went very well. It was very satisfying. That I did not meet the president at that time. I met him later on. But after that luncheon meeting with the head of the department and the head of the Board of Trustees, when the time came, I went to Tufts early. I didn't go just the day I was to begin teaching. And I was building equipment for the main course I was to give. And into the shop came the president of the institution. His name was Nils Wessel. And we had a nice long chat, and it was just, how are you doing? And this will be an important opportunity for you and for the Tufts, because this is such an important course that all the majors have to take. So that began what was a very rewarding experience between me and the president. It's very, very solid. It listens to its own drum. No, it really does. I remember when I first came to Tufts, a lot of people, a lot of faculty who couldn't get tenure at Harvard came over to Tufts. That probably is not happening. We're probably minting our own. There was a sense of, we had our own story to tell, and we're increasingly telling it. And now some of the people whom we used to listen to are now listening to us. And that's a very important point. The most important single factor is to both expand the pool and look for the best person. And expanding the pool means broadening your criteria and being tolerant of looking at people who at one time would not have been in the pool. And I believe that. I believe that. I think it's also important to give more thought to the possibility of exchanging faculty with other institutions, both historically Black institutions and, well, especially to include the possibility of looking at people from historically Black institutions. A big part of the story is that Tufts attracts a student body that, on balance, is ready to participate in the change. And they did an awful lot to make my job and the job of many faculty easier and to give it more credibility. And I've said that before, and I'll say it again. They really are a part of, they wanted me to succeed. They really did. They wanted me to succeed. And they wanted leadership to come from within the faculty in interaction with the students. And that's just a continuing story. And nobody will tell the full story until more attention is given to this particular piece that I'm talking to. And that I'm talking to. Well, I feel I was doing my job. That's how I feel. That was part of my job. I had, clearly, we reach further into pools to look at candidates. I think some people were attracted to Tufts because we reached out to them. And some of the programs that we were supporting were appealing to them. So I understand what that means. I don't think it's especially a tribute to me as much as it is I was doing my job, and in that process, more people were attracted to the university. And that was certainly the case.
Thank you very much, Dean Harleston. Hearing your voice and being able to sit in your presence is such a gift. It is the voice from, in some ways, from the source, as we've been hearing in the last panel. And we have such gratitude for you. You may be listening right now. So just want to say it again, thank you. And also, listening to that interview with Bernie Harleston, I can't help but also feel such gratitude for Alonzo. So I just want to say again, Alonzo, your work to be present to our honorees over this past 6 months and to invite them to be present to you and through you to us. This is a gift. So you have powers which are remarkable, and we're just so happy that we got to work on this project with you. Thank you, thank you. So now we're ready for our second panel. Before we begin, there are a couple, some business that we want to complete first, and I'm going to introduce you to someone in a moment. But let me say the following, that our second panel extends the theme of excellence in university governance at Tufts. The participants who will now be meeting, and like we just saw also in the special feature on Dean Bernie Harleston, they show us what it means to lead from the community and with the community, as we heard in our last panel, and what it means to work in a way that allows an entire community to flourish and to thrive. The theme for this last panel is transforming leadership, leading while Black at Tufts and beyond. In this panel, our 4 honorees all served, each in their distinctive ways, as institution builders. They built new physical infrastructures and new educational systems to advance Tufts' core mission, and they inaugurated new processes and protocols for equitable decision-making. We may even take for granted the solidity and the durability of those things that they built when they were here, those things that still serve us to this day. Before we start the panel, it is now my great pleasure to first turn it over to Provost Caroline Jenko to say a few words. Caroline is currently the Provost and Senior Vice President ad interim and a respected leader and scientist who has fostered a culture of collaboration through her tenure at Tufts, first as chair of the Department of Immunology at the School of Medicine, as well as her previous role as the Vice Provost for Research. She has advocated for the research and scholarship mission of all disciplines across schools, helped the university respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and worked with the chief diversity officers, faculty, and administrators to develop the Tufts' first cohort program, whose goal is to increase faculty diversity among those underrepresented in medicine and science. Thank you for joining us today, Provost Jenko. Over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I just want to first say that this is really an honor to be able to introduce all of you. I'm really humbled to be able to do this. You're all amazing. Your bios are amazing. And all of you have had amazing journeys. I just want to say journeys with significant impact here at Tufts and outside of Tufts. And I wish I could, spend the next hour telling all of you how wonderful you are, but I don't have that time. So I'm just going to say a few words about all of you, but I'm really honored to be able to do that this afternoon. First is Vivian Penn, who served as an associate professor in the Department of Pathology in the medical school from 1970 to 1982. Vivian was also the associate dean for student affairs in the medical school from 1974 to 1982. As associate dean, Vivian focused on expanding admission of Black students, other students of color, and women, and importantly, creating initiatives and networks to mentor those students once they arrived at Tufts. Importantly, Vivian's impact here at Tufts continues. Vivian is currently on the board of advisors for the School of Medicine. She's also a member of the External Advisory Committee for the Tufts First program that Chris mentioned. And I want to thank her for all of her support. Second is Lonnie Norris, who served as a professor in the dental school from 1980 to 2011. And importantly, he was the first Black tenured professor in the School of Dental Medicine at Tufts. He became the first Black dean at the medical school and served in that role from 1995 to 2011. As dean, he devoted himself to increasing the size and expertise of faculty and staff and to enhancing the avenues of collaboration with other parts of the university. Under his leadership, in the School of Dental Medicine, they became a national leader in enrollment of Black and Latinx students. Lonnie's career in leadership here at Tufts and beyond was characterized by crossing boundaries, taking down barriers, and conducting new conversations, as he says, in the room. Next is Joanne Berger Sweeney. Joanne was the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences from 2010 to 2014. Again, she was the first and only Black woman to serve as Dean. She implemented cluster hires to diversify faculty, and under her leadership, the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy was created. Joanne also established the Bridge to Liberal Arts Success, or BLAST program at Tufts, which focuses on creating a pipeline for first-generation students to the university. She worked on building bridges between the School of Arts and Sciences and other schools at Tufts, including the schools of medicine and engineering. And one quote that I took from her video, her journey has always followed the guiding star of helping people to understand, even just a little bit better, their power and their potential. And last is David Harris, who served as provost and senior vice president at Tufts from 2012 to 2018. David also broke down boundaries of stereotypes to become the first Black provost in the university's history. His major accomplishments here at Tufts included T10, the first comprehensive Tufts University-wide strategic plan, the establishment of the University Faculty Senate, and importantly, the creation of the Tufts Century Ride. As an institutional builder, David recognized ways in which he was a mentor and a role model for people across the institution. So before I turn it over back to Chris, I just want to say something about some common themes of these four leaders during their leadership at Tufts that continue today. That includes building bridges between our schools, breaking down barriers, cluster hires to diversify our faculty, continued support and mentoring and networking for students and faculty, and importantly, very, very importantly, leadership development. So one final word, I just want to say that David was actually a mentor for me personally. He supported me throughout my leadership development at Tufts. And David, I could never imagine that on January 1st, I took on the role of provost and senior vice president. My office is now the office that I used to come and talk to you in. So I'm just thrilled to be here today. And I want to thank you personally for your mentoring during my time here at Tufts. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Chris.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Now let's begin our panel discussion with our four very, very special honorees. We're so grateful to have you in the same Zoom room, if not in the same physical room, for the next hour together. Now, when I listened to the stories that you each so generously recorded with Alonzo, and by the way, which are all available on the LWB website, you'll find them all there for those who are in the audience. So when I listened to those stories, I was struck by the importance of your origins, if you like, your origin story, how you grew up, where you grew up, what happened to you as you were growing up, and how that informed your later aims and achievements as transformative leaders. So I wanted to begin by asking you to share a little bit from those origin stories with us. What is it about where you began that you think helped you become the kind of leader that you are today? And I wonder if I could begin with Vivian Pinn. Vivian, do you share with us?
Thank you. I guess when I think back to, remember I came to Tufts in 1970, growing up and going to segregated schools in the South and coming north to Boston, and then going back to medical school at Virginia, where integration was just beginning in the city of Charlottesville, and recognizing that I was so fortunate to have opportunities that others were not getting, and watching what was happening to others. And so I just realized that somebody had to speak out and speak up for those who probably had far more talents than I did, but perhaps were not as vocal or not in situations to speak for themselves. I give one example, which is related to mentoring. And I think most of my career has been spent in mentoring and trying to be there for students and even sometimes for other faculty members coming along. But I remember in medical school, there was only one female professor, and I was the only woman in my medical school class, and of course, the only person of color. And there were no faculty members of color, so I was sort of it. And the woman who was the only full professor had no interest in being available for me or the nurses. We were the females of the medical school. And I remember thinking, well, fortunately, my father, who was not a physician, was where I would run home to get support. But thinking how bad that was to not have someone to yield to. So when I got to Tufts and students just sort of sought me out, I wasn't that much older than they were. I was young then, but with the students. And I just felt I couldn't say no. I had to provide the time if they needed answers or wanted someone to relate to because of what I had experienced when the only person that really should have been available to me had no interest. And I think that experience, when I look back on it just a couple of years ago, I realized that really has informed the energy that I have put into mentoring and providing opportunities and listening to guide those coming behind me. And I've done it for just about everything, not only for personal initiatives, but when I was at NIH, building that into the career development programs that we had. And then just feeling that not everybody wants to speak up or speak out. I guess they want to preserve their position and not cause problems. And fortunately or unfortunately, that has not been my style. I have often spoken out when no one else really wanted to speak out. But I guess I just felt that if I didn't do it, if no one else was going to do it, then I'd have to do it and then hope others would come along behind me. And if they didn't, I've done my best. So that's sort of a brief response, but one that's really meaningful to me in terms of how some of my early experiences affected my later career.
Thank you so much. And may I invite any of our other panelists to feel free to just jump in.
My name is Lonnie Norris, as you introduced me. I was born in Houston, Texas, and it was, again, during the time of segregation. So all the schools, elementary, all the way up through high school and college during that time were segregated. I give much of my credit to my family, core family. I was a first generation student, and the highest before me was high school graduation. But my family had great emphasis on work ethics and moral character. And they were all respected in the job that they did. And I don't ever remember any pressure for me to be the highest academic student. It was always about character and work ethics. I was told to do the best I could do in anything I do, be respectful to other people, be respectful of myself, have good integrity, and just be helpful to anybody I could be helpful to. Because of this, I think that many phases in my life, and my course to come into academics and deanship and everything was a really varied pathway. But anywhere in life, I've always had people that seem to have wanted to help me, to motivate me, to encourage me, to give me opportunities. And I do think it's because of some of my core values as someone that people that think that they can trust, or someone that would really appreciate the help that they were receiving to make their lives better. That started with my teachers. I remember all the way through elementary school, up through high school. They wanted everyone to succeed. My community, not many people were going to college, and they encouraged all the students to try to go to college to make it better for themselves. Even at that, I had not applied to college. I finished school in January because Houston had 2 times the graduation, and I hadn't applied. I was thinking didn't have the financial means to go, and I would work for 6 months and then apply. My principal at high school, which was then the president of the Alumni Society at Fisk University, he had already reached out to FISC about my academic performance and character. And he had already called FISC. I got called to the office, and I thought, when you get called to the principal office in those days, you thought you had done something wrong. And I got called to the office, and he said, I've already reached out to FISC. You can be accepted. I've given them your credentials. Can you go? And I said, I can't afford to go to college. He said, well, the city of Houston also gives a scholarship to 4 or 5 students in each class in the city, and FISC will give you financial aid. Do you have the courage to go? Will your family let you go? None of my family had left Texas. Very seldom got out of the city limits of Houston. So it was an opportunity. And I think that influenced my life, that whenever I can be helpful in the position that I had, to help others, help students get into school, to be proactive and try to encourage people to do things, to mentor. It all was because of the opportunities that were given to me when I had no other guidelines about what to do.
Maybe I'll jump in next. Hi, I'm Joanne Berger Sweeney. And I realize of the people on this panel, I was at Tufts for the shortest amount of time, 4 years. And I've been here at Trinity College for 8 years. I was at Wellesley before for 19 years, but those 4 years were very influential in my career and I think in my leadership style. So I want to say thank you to all of the people on this call who overlapped with me and all of the people who came before and paved the way. But the origin story that I want to share with you is actually quite a personal one. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and my mother did not believe that her children should wake up to alarm clocks. She would wake us up every morning with a kiss, and she would say, "You can be anything you want to be." Every morning, that is how I was awakened. And so the influence that that has had on, I think, my leadership style and my career is it gave me a confidence. And when you're a leader, it can be a very, very lonely path. When you are a Black leader, it can be even more lonely because you are very often a unicorn. You are rare. You don't see a lot of people around you. And the confidence that I was given from my very earliest memories in childhood helped me try new things, gave me the confidence to fail because you're certainly not going to do everything perfectly, but gave me a confidence, I think, that helped my leadership. But the second thing that being awakened like that every morning is it instilled in me a sense of care and of personal care and attention. Someone cared about me so much that they didn't even want me to be awakened by an alarm clock. And from that, I have realized that leadership has to be undergirded with care and compassion for human beings. So my 2 early lessons, based on how my mother woke me up every morning and the early influences in my life were confidence and care. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And it's great being with all of you. I just, I wish we were in person, but it's so nice even on the Zoom boxes with all of you. I had the great pleasure of being there with Lonnie, with Joanne, Vivian, who's Board of Advisors, as well as Katrina, Chris, Alonzo, of course, and then Caroline and Tony. And Tony's the one who, of course, brought me in. So I thank you all for putting this together. It's a really fantastic experience. There's only one bad thing I have to say, and I'm a little unhappy, Chris and Katrina, is I've never felt like a historical figure. I feel kind of old all of a sudden. Other than that, everything here is wonderful. I appreciate the message. So in terms of origin stories, there's so many things, but just to be brief, So I said in the video that, I was born in 1969 and lived in Philadelphia, initially in the city, an African-American community. And then when I was 8, I like to say we browned the suburbs. So I said, we moved to that inner ring suburbs, and I was the first Black kid in the Little League and all those things. And so I think from an early age, I understood about navigating across communities, about who people thought I was going to be, about who I am, and how to bridge those differences and work with folks. I also then moved on to Northwestern University as a first-gen college student who was also a Pell student, an African-American in an overwhelmingly white environment, and continued to try to understand how I fit in, who people thought I was, and how I could express who I was and find opportunities. And Lonnie, I resonate with your story about the principal because, for me, and I like the good thing I'm not alone. For me, the only reason I was ever having these jobs was a professor named Karen Fusen, who my junior year of college at Northwestern University called me. And Lonnie, I resonate because I was like, oh, what'd I do? And she called me to say there's a program to get, then we said minority students to pursue PhDs, and here's a summer program. You work with a faculty member. And I had that relationship with that faculty member that summer, got a publication, and kept running through the PhD. So lessons I took from all of that, first one's opportunity. It would be so easy for me not to have had the opportunity to do the things I've done. It's almost an accident that it happened, given all the odds that go the other way, where I've started, my parents' lack of higher ed and so forth. And so what I see is we've got to be places that help create that opportunity for folks. I mean, there's something Joanne said to me once, I'm sure she doesn't remember it, but we were talking once in a group, or maybe just two of us, can't remember, about financial aid. And you said that, we want to put a lot of money into financial aid, but we also want to make sure that we have resources to ensure that we're the kind of school that's deserving of the students we get here, paraphrasing. And so that stuck with me, that sort of opportunity piece. And the other one is just, and I tell the faculty this year at Union College, I'm not fortunate enough to be president, is, 30 years from now, how are you going to be remembered? By the people who were in your place, the school place where you worked. You can be that faculty member that's the Karen Fusen, that's the high school principal Lonnie talked about. Or you can be those other kind of people that we don't mention so much, but we all remember, who actually were the people who got in our way and we nonetheless were successful. So I try and keep that in mind and do the little things to, pay it forward, as Professor Fusen did for me. So just a few thoughts, Chris, on all the questions on the question you asked.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you all. I mean, as I was listening to you, what's striking to me is you all obviously are people of sharp and remarkable intelligence, but you didn't feature the question of the academic preparation that you have done. You led with questions about character and about care, about how to find oneself in relationship to others and bridge the difference between them. And then what Vivian was saying, the focus on the voice, being able to use your voice, and sometimes when others aren't, and knowing that you could do that. So I'm just struck at the kind of that level of sharing that you provided, and the importance of character and your characters in your leadership. And so it leads me to ask another question about leadership. To be a leader, and I'm gathering it from what you've just shared, and maybe Joanne's point about the kiss from her mother and the inspiration of that in her career, which is very poignant. The idea that to be a leader is also to care for others, to empower a diverse community of many kinds of others. And so that's really what I wanted to ask you to reflect on next. If you could tell us about how you helped mentor others. Do you have a mentoring style? What is it? But also if you wanted to share a little bit more about who mentored you and what you learned about mentoring from your mentors. It kind of carries on from some of the stuff we were just talking about. So who would like to begin?
Well, I'll take that one on as a start. One thing that I have learned is that if you really want to empower others, hire well and get out of their way. I don't think anyone will ever call me a micromanager. Once you have made that decision about whom to hire to do a particular bit of work, then what you can do most to help, to empower them, to mentor them, is actually to give them the freedom, sometimes to fail, and you're there to support them if they fail, and you're there to cheer them on and applaud when they do well. But specifically when you ask about mentoring, I heard this from someone that I was working with, Mariko Silver, who is CEO and president of the Luce Foundation at the moment. And we were on a panel and she was asked about mentorship. And she said, at the basis of mentorship is love. She said, otherwise you're just giving someone advice. But do you continue to do it? Do you continue to actually, as a mentor, put opportunities in front of someone that allows them to advance their career, not just once, not just at one stage, but continually? And at the basis of that, as I've said, to want to do that for another human being, it really is a basis of love. And I have had marvelous mentors. Diana Chapman Walsh, who was president at Trinity College. I'm sorry, at Wellesley College.
Thank you.
When I was there. Larry Backow and Jamshed Barucha, who decided to take a risk on this woman from a small liberal arts college and bring her to Tufts, a university. They provided incredible mentorship for me and very influential. And they have continued to do that up to the present day. And my thesis advisor, I'm a neuroscientist by training, Joe Coyle at Johns Hopkins University, wrote me a letter of recommendation to become president here at Trinity College, which was 25 years after the time I was in his laboratory as an undergraduate. So I'm going to leave, I hope, you with the impression mentorship is lifelong when you take it on. And I do think it has a basis of love.
That's well said, Joanne. I won't add much. I just think about a couple of my mentors. One was a guy named Roberto Fernandez, who was that faculty member I got connected with all those years ago, as summer before my senior year at Northwestern. And I remember it well. Roberto would, every once in a while, he'd say, David, close the door. And so in his office, and that was when it was just hair down, just life advice. Ask any question you want. There's no stupid question. And just learned all sorts of things, not just about sociology, but about, in that case, Roberto being Latino, navigating a department as a faculty member at a predominantly white institution. And I was learning this as a 21-year-old senior. And I think about Biddy Martin, who's the president of Amherst, who's stepping down after this year. And Biddy's the one who, I said, if it weren't for Biddy, I'd just be a faculty member still. And some days, Joanne, as we lead through COVID, I think that wouldn't be so bad. And Tony as well, right? And the timing wasn't so good. But Biddy also pulled me as a full professor into being VP Social Sciences and then Deputy Provost, and then later I replaced her as interim. But she also would often have those moments of just, close the door and let's just talk. And that gave me the opportunity to learn quickly things that would have taken me even longer if it had just been hierarchical and I always had to fear asking that wrong question and the person thinking they want to work with me more. So that love, it's one of the ways in which, Joanne, I think it manifests itself, and I try and do the same thing for others.
In my case, when I came to the school, I came as a resident in oral surgery, and the chair of the department, H. Bristol Koo, also was a university distinguished professor, actually first at the dental school to receive that honor. We knew we had responsibility for teaching oral surgery procedures in the clinic and patients, service to patients, and didactic courses, but he had a broader scope. He was on many committees at the university that helped write bylaws and policies and had connections across departments, and was a true leader. When I say a true leader, he had international and national recognition, and he mentored me very closely. He put me on the tenure track. He made sure that I had opportunities to do some things nationally, internationally, work on committed to school. And at first, I didn't really understand all of that because I came in to teach oral surgery and do patient care. And some of these extra things were extra responsibilities that was eating my time up, I thought, but it was actually broadened my scope to make me a better understanding of academics and the university and the school. And so he was my greatest mentor. Also, when I became dean, the provost at that time was Saul Gilman. He was the one that appointed me as dean. He took me under his wing. I could call him at any time, meet with him anytime, always with some very good advice on how to handle some of the various things that goes on across the university, not only at the Dome School. Steve Manos was the executive vice president. Of course, when we came up through our careers, undoubtedly we came research, clinical and teaching and service, not as much business background. Steve Manos actually had many sessions with me overall about the budget, just privately, not not with the grouping that we had working on budgets. And then there was Tom Manane. The deans have a lot of responsibility, meeting with alumni and fundraising. And Tom Manane took me under his wing also, and I should travel with him on some international trips, and he would travel with me on some of the things they've done. So I think I had plenty of mentoring. As far as me mentoring, I can proudly say that when I left the Department of Oral Surgery, there was a woman oral surgeon that finished the program 2 years after I finished and joined the faculty just like me. And in 1998, I assigned her or appointed her as the chair of oral surgery. It was the first woman chair of oral surgery in the United States. Also, I've been out of deanship now 11 years, but I still have people. I work with American Dental Education Education Association, which has a leadership institution, and I was advising there. So I have people that about 24 people a year go into that leadership institute. So they continue to contact me for either letters of recommendation or other things. And most recently, I had some gentleman that met me over 10 years ago. He was at education at another university. He's a Black gentleman, and he just now became the dean of the University of Minnesota. So this was a long-term relationship, just talking. And so it makes me proud. Right now, when I became dean, there was only 58 deans of dental schools in America. So to be one of 58 was quite prestigious for me to be a dean. And now I think there are 5 deans, and he is one of 70 deans in America. So to have someone else that I know got to be a deanship that was Afro-American was very nice to me.
I'll just comment on a personal thing, a couple of personal issues, and then sort of one of my mantras in terms of mentoring in general. Or maybe I'll do that first, and that is I always advise individuals, whether they're still in the student phase or professional phase, to look back on those individuals or episodes that had a negative effect on your career development, because you can learn a lot, not just from the positive aspects and positive exposures, but you can learn a lot from looking at those who had a negative effect on your career and make sure that you don't duplicate those failures of those you've been exposed to over the years. I think that can make an important and a wonderful difference in being a caring, empathetic mentor. And I would go into more of that, but I just have to observe, David, you mentioned you were born in 1969, and I joined the faculty at Tufts in 1970. So sort of puts it in some kind of perspective. I don't know what that is, but I can say that a year after you were born, I had students at Tufts who came to me, we began to interact, and that I'm still in touch with today. In fact, one of my current physicians was in the class of 1974 that I met at the beginning of school in the fall of 1970 at Tufts. And here we are, how many years later? I won't say how many, but he is one of my primary care physicians. And what I really love the fact that all of you are emphasizing empathy and love. And actually, I think that carries over so much for me in discussing the pandemic and what was missing and why we had such a awful record with the pandemic, because empathy was missing. And that I see as the essence for the future of medicine today and tomorrow, but that's not our topic. But knowing how to mentor and caring and understanding what mentoring is about. And obviously I feel very strongly about that. And I'll just mention that ending up in leadership and I have to give credit to both Laura Cavazos, who was the dean when John Mayer was president. Cavazos was the dean of Tufts Medical School, who, seeing me working with the students, said to me one day, "You're essentially doing the job of student affairs. You might as well have the title." And that's how I got the title of Assistant Dean of Student Affairs. And actually, I think I and a woman named Jane, and I'm blanking on her last name, were the first two women deans. She was Assistant Dean for Community Affairs, and I was for Student Affairs. And who said to me one day when I was just enjoying being in the Tufts environment, that he wanted to send me to the Association of American Medical Colleges annual meeting, national meeting. And he said, "I think you can learn a lot there that will not only benefit you, but that you can bring back to benefit the school." And thinking about that over the course of my career, I've made a big effort for those who I think would excel in leadership to make sure they are exposed beyond the institution where we were, to get those exposures and to read really. And that was really how I got involved in national medical politics, thinking about leadership positions, getting access to leadership positions. And I'm still active with the AAMC today. And then, of course, I have to acknowledge Dr. Martin Flax, who was the chief of pathology, who left MGH to come to Tufts and brought me with him. And so I came to Tufts as a new faculty member in pathology. That's when I hooked up with the students, and I have to give him credit. He's no longer alive, but in addition to carrying out, and I did stay on top of my pathology responsibilities, he never objected to the time I was spending with students. And that's something we as leaders have to recognize. And also in terms of mentorship for leadership, and that is that we have to allow a time for those that we are mentoring or who are under us to develop in their new areas. And I have to give him credit for that. The two of them really set me on my way starting back in 1970. And I have to just add that even this week, even yesterday, getting a gift from one of my students from the 70s, we continue to be close. Those of us who were together in the 70s and early 80s, it really was sort of like, I don't want to say a sorority fraternity, but we really were a close group who supported each other. And I just have wonderful memories, not only of being on the faculty, but of the student relationships and mentoring that have continued until today. And Lonnie, sort of like what you said, I think some of my greatest achievements aren't really mine. It's seeing what those who were my former students have been able to attain and the positions they go in, and the fact that they just even acknowledge that I knew them on the way. That's enough, sort of some of my remembrances.
Thank you so much to all of you. As I'm listening to you, I'm struck by how, we often think of university leaders or executive leaders as leading large collections of people and large institutions, making decisions at a collective level. But what you've shared, it kind of comes to the fore that to be an effective leader is to make one personal connection at a time and to make it meaningful, and to have also benefited from so many personal connections. And I love this theme that's beginning to weave its way through the conversation of love and empathy and affection, including the affection that you share for each other, and that I could feel certainly from Joanne and from David when they were at Tufts and I was an assistant professor. So yeah, I appreciate this level of sharing about the personal, even though we're talking about things that in some ways are very collective at the university level. And since we have you, all four of you, which is a very unusual treat, we thought we'd ask you for your advice for the next question. So get ready. But I think we're going to all learn from what you have to share. So often we think of retention as a matter of preventing our excellent faculty and staff from being pulled away to other institutions. But there's another way of thinking about retention, and it's how do we ensure that our faculty and staff of color feel that they are not being pushed away, often through issues around climate or access to mentoring and support, or equitable representation within the institution. And so that's our question, the next question. What are your thoughts on how to build institutions that become long-term homes for a diverse faculty and staff?
I'll start off. Let's first, I think it has something to do with communication too. I mean, overall communication. Everything is communication, communication, communication to build relationships. And I think, I know when I first started off, because I've been various other places, because my pathway was different, industry for a while, military for a while, and then into the schools. They made sure that sometime I was the first person or I got into positions, but nobody really, and they looked at your work, but they never really asked you about your well-being. How were you doing overall in life? How were you doing in the community? Was anybody being racist outside of the job or anything? So they just looked at your performance and tried to, and many times help you do your job better because it helped the system better. But I don't know if it really understood the whole dynamics of you as a person. And I don't need to, and so I really think that that people should really, did I get cut off? Let's just see.
No,
Am I still there?
Yes.
Okay, I heard something big. So I really think that we need to communicate better. And then I think that we also need to, when people do a good job, sometimes we talk as I, as the leader. We should always talk about as we, and give people recognition for what they have done, and give them a chance to grow. I mean, they come there and they still have, even though they working as an organization or part of our team, they still have personal goals that they would like to achieve. I mean, they come in not at quite the end point of their career. Someone could be at the beginning part of their career, or even if they mature in their career, it may be some higher things and responsibilities they want. I think we have to give them the time as we add more responsibilities to them, give them style, give them things that let them know that that you value them and would help them retain them. And I think it's just more of understanding better in communication.
I loved Lonnie's answer on communication, and I'm going to follow up with another C word, which is, I think, a sense of community. Now, I'm going to step back and start with a story that when I arrived at Tufts School of Arts and Sciences in 2010, I was, granted tenure and full professor. When I was there, when I started, I was the only Black female full professor at the School of Arts and Sciences. And as the dean, I wasn't teaching. So, did I really, count in that sense? And I want to start there because maybe another C word to use is context. And when you think about retention, you have to think about the climate and you have to think about the context in which it's happening. So I arrive at the School of Arts and Sciences and I look around and say, there aren't at the moment Black women who are full professors. And even if there are those that are younger, it's hard for them to serve as mentors because they're still fighting, right? To get tenure. Now, at the same time, and this harkens back a little bit to, what Lisa was talking about, Lisa Coleman, in the previous session, that I also came into Tufts at a time of protest. And the Black students were protesting the fact that they did not have a Black or Africana Studies department. And if I am not mistaken, I know Tony Monaco, is on the call. I believe it was his first week, it was certainly his first month, that the Black students took over Ballou Hall, and we were actually discussing, what are we going to do? Because they were demanding to have an Africana Studies department. And one thing that I will tell you, a little side note here, is that Tony was so energized by the situation, and he actually helped keep my spirits up, because it's like, oh my gosh, they're yelling, they're protesting. And he had come from the UK, and he said, I love the energy of these American students. It was the most wonderful thing, as we were sitting in his office in Ballou and sending out delegations as to who was going to talk to the students. But I'm really sharing that little story to say, when you talk about retention of faculty, you can't talk about that alone, because it is the entire climate. It's how students are feeling. It's how staff are feeling. And what I always thought about creating a sense of community is that it was going to help everyone, not simply the retention of people of color. And I think back a little bit to Yuri Treisman's work, a mathematician who, was trying to figure out, why are, Black kids not being retained in mathematics. And what he found was, when he started implementing support that helped Black students, it helped all students who were on the margins. So it's a way of saying that we may be talking about retention of a particular race or a particular subgroup, but these subgroups are almost like canaries in the mine. They're giving you an indication about the overall sense of community and the overall climate, and that is about everybody wanting to be retained. It is really about setting a climate in which all of the faculty that you bring into the institution want to be there, because if they want to be there, it's hard to pick them off. I've said enough.
So I might just add, first of all, Tony, I think we all came in at a time of student protest. It was just which protest?
Which one?
I'm thinking about other ones as well that we dealt with. It was always nice being the provost, because no one knows what a provost does. So they were going upstairs to the Dean of Arts and Sciences or across the hall to Tony. So just a few things to say. One is that, one of the things I think about is the wrong time to work on diversity, equity, inclusion is after something has happened. I often always talk about the fact that, my friend Jim Stavridis, who I brought in as the Dean of Fletcher School,
right?
What he would say, and he said he saw me doing the same thing, is we led by walking the ship. And what that means is that bad news doesn't flow up in an organization very well. And so to be able to do the kind of things that Chris is talking about, to be able to identify those challenges before they come up and really understand them, you can't just sit back and wait in the provost's office and wait for reports and so forth. It's too late. People don't lie, but they shade it a little bit to the positive. When they talk to the person they report to, by the time it gets to you, or even Tony, even worse yet, I've shaded it a little more for you, Tony. You actually don't know. And so for me, that's where, it was the bike ride that gets talked about. That was just an accident that it was created, because I wanted to go on a bike ride. Somebody would go with me. And so every year we did, to hit all the campuses. It's why I had office hours. There were open office hours for faculty, staff, and students with no agenda. And it's why I would just pop into people's offices, or just be walking around campus and pop in and chat a little. So when you think about, how to create those situations in which people want to be there and you're not in a reactive mode, I think you need to do the things that communication, create community, but part of this is about being accessible and just understanding the organization by getting out there in the shoe leather approach, as well as the more formal ways.
Right. And I realize, I'm so sorry, but I have to interrupt because I didn't see something that really is quite important. I realized that part of the issue of creating a climate was making sure that we had academic entities that would attract faculty of color to Trinity. And I am extremely proud that it was when I was there that we created what I think is now the Race, Colonialism, and Diaspora Studies and Department. We created the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy. And so I thought it was essential to put in infrastructure that allowed faculty of color to know that they would be welcome on Trinity's campus. So
Wait, just she meant Tufts. Joanne's doing the same thing I do. It's
oh
nearly
my gosh,
impossible.
did I call it Trinity again?
I do it all the time. I can't talk about one school.
I did it the reverse.
Yes.
When I first came here to Trinity, I was always calling it Tufts.
Same.
And everybody was giving me that look. I'm sorry, Tufts.
Thank you, Joanne. We know you're talking about us.
I'm sorry. Tufts.
Vivian, for you, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, I'll just comment. I really agree and support what we've heard from each of the other respondents, but I want to go back and emphasize what Donnie said about having people feel they're wanted. I still get calls from especially women of color who are either being considered for or have been selected for positions of leadership, asking, do they really want me, or do they really care about me, and is this the position I should take? As well as, surprisingly, several instances at universities in the Northeast where there have been appointments made to higher leadership positions, and they're getting the messages that you only got this position because you're Black, you only got this position, which is really discouraging. So I would just summarize what my response would be, which is that we need to make sure, if we're going to retain talent, retain faculty, that they know that they are appreciated, not just in terms of their academic work, that also, but also as individuals. And I think that's very important, because I hear from so many who say, I just can't take it here any longer because I don't think they care about me. It's just how many papers I publish or what grants I get. And then the second thing is that we can't ignore those still resistant facets of racism that are still there and affecting some of our new hires or potential hires that you would bring on or moving into leadership positions, and to make sure there is support when those of us are moving into leadership positions, some support and avenues to get some redress, because it's very distressing. I have a young woman now who's just moved into a wonderful department chair position, but who is really considering whether or not she's going to continue in that, even though she just named, because of all the negative under the cover comments about, you just got it because you're Black, et cetera. So we can't forget those issues as we speak about the high powers of what we could do to mentor and support. We've got to make sure we can support the base reactions to that racism that still exists.
Yeah, I wonder if I just might pick up where Vivian was. One of the things I think is so fascinating here, and we don't have time for it, I understand, Chris, but I feel like you need to, I can't assign anything. I'm not even the provost there anymore, but I think there's a whole separate panel, if it doesn't exist, on why it's called Leading While Black. It's not called Black Leaders. It's sort of really interesting. I know it's intentional. I know Katrina, it didn't happen by accident. But what it says along the lines of what Vivian's talking about is, I didn't feel like Tony hired a Black provost. He hired Dave to be provost, who was Black.
Yeah.
And so all of us led thinking about being African-Americans, but I'm sure I can speak for all of us. We never led saying we are only Black leaders.
Yeah.
We're leaders of the school and therefore leading while Black. So it gets to Vivian's point, and someday, Chris, you can let me know, or Katrina, I'd love to hear the alternative names and why you actually picked this one, because I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to that follow-up panel about the making of. Absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome to join.
It's a director's cut on your DVD, Chris.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also love the word that Vivian just used at the end, which was the high powers, and sharing with us some of those high powers that you have exercised in terms of retention for the whole community, like Joanne was saying. But also Vivian used was kind of suggesting that there's this kind of low frequency work too, the high frequency and the low frequency of how to approach this problem from different angles and different ways. And that seems just very, very interesting. I want to think about that some more. And you are giving us so much to think about, and so, there's so many riches. And so for our last question, we kind of want to end in some ways, the same place where we began our conversation. We asked you about origin stories at the start, and it was a personal question. And so we want to end again with a question that goes to the personal. And it's a question about how you manage challenges. We'd ask if you could tell us about one challenge you faced as an executive university leader. And how did you maintain your motivation? How did you maintain your well-being? Even how did you maintain your spirit or the lift of your spirit in that context? So would you share with us about that, about what resilience means to you, what it looks like?
So I'll start. I guess I haven't started. So I actually surrounded myself with some Tufts things to remind me. I even brought in my old marathon medal down, but for this one, I guess, and I didn't know I wasn't prepared, but so this is Tufts in 10. This was the strategic plan T10 that I ended up leading. And I said in the video that, as soon as I joke, never become provost in the president's second year, because Tony had a year to get running and there I was. And he's like, let's go. Here's what we're doing. So we're doing a strategic plan. And the easy thing to do, the historical thing at Tufts would have been, all right, deans, go do your plans. And what Tony and I said was, no, we're gonna be successful because we're a university, and that was not an easy process. It was not an easy process in part because the people at the medical school didn't know the people in arts and sciences for the most part. People in the vet school didn't know the people in engineering, and Fletcher School with others. But the real value add of Tufts wasn't just its departments or its schools, it was the university. And so that was difficult. I remember lots of conversations with faculty meetings were challenging, but we knew we were on the right path. And we had early on, had Joanne as a partner before she went off to Trinity, and had the deans who bought into it. And it was difficult, but I feel like the school under my 6 years, it was stronger because we took that approach than if we let it be split out and fragmented. And how do we sustain ourselves? I think, really it was, I don't have to say this now because I don't work there anymore, but it was Tony as a partner was huge. Having a president who was thoroughly committed to the university and thoroughly committed to a fellow traveler on this was huge. And then for me, it's been challenging as president with COVID, but bike rides, right? Finding time to just get away and take a ride early in the mornings and clear my head before I had to go back in and have interesting conversations with folks over things like, what does the word impact mean? And why can we not use it in a strategic plan? Tony may remember that among other fun things we dealt with. So anyway, that's just some thoughts about challenges we face and how we sustained ourselves.
I wonder if who would like to go next? What does resilience look like for you?
Okay, I can go. When I became dean, there were very few Black students in the school. Underrepresented minorities, Black, Latino, etc. Just wasn't that many people in the school, and I knew I couldn't be a leader of a school without having some representations of diversity, and so it became a real priority of doing so. And this became a priority, and at the same time, I knew it would be a culture change. You have, various people, that think that some of us can't meet the standards of doing things, and wonder how that was going to affect the school overall to bring people in. I can say we went recruiting and let it be known that we wanted people, and we didn't want to bring people in. It would have been not a great thing to bring people in and then have them fail out. You just can't do that, because people would say, oh, we gave you opportunity to bring people in, they didn't meet our standards, and now we don't want any more, or some reason to keep diversity down. So we recruited, and we brought in the first few students, and I give credit to the students, all the students we brought in. They had great character. They also met academic standards. We had programs put in for support, but as has been said before, most programs had to do with early identification if people had any problem with classes. And we had all students, any race, whatever, what came across that got that early attention if they needed support. So over the first 5 years, we became one of the schools that were in the top 10 Dillon schools in enrollment of underrepresented minorities. And when I left, we were still in the top 10. And now I give credit to the admissions officers at the school now. We are in the leading in the top 3 or 4 schools in America with diversity in students. Howard and Meharry are the top 2, and we right in that area with diversity with students. The challenge have been and still exists. We are leading a school in students. We were able to open up this pathway, goes from having students in dental school and then into postgrad programs. We opened that up. I think just about every program that we have at the dental school now have had residents or have residents that are underrepresented minorities. But it's still a leap that we have not been able to meet the challenge of having as many faculty members. There are so many, there's just so many people that come, so little few, I should say, people that come to dental school. I think it's a total of 300 to 400 students a year get accepted into dental school that are Black students for sure. And the debt is one thing. They came in mostly because of they wanted to provide care, as clinicians don't understand academics as much. But whatever, I've had still a lot of challenges of having recruitment of faculty. I mean, that goes on, but definitely on the student side, we have made Tufts as one of the leaders.
Well, I will take a stab at talking about it. And actually, I am going to relay a challenge that happened at Trinity. So after I left Tufts, but it's still, when I look back at it, was one of the most difficult times in my presidency. And it was a time when a faculty member made a statement. Campus reform attacked it, and I had to determine what the institution was going to do. And it was challenging because at the time this was going on, there was also a lot going on politically around freedom of speech. There was, I think, 1 month after this happened at Trinity, there was the Charlottesville incident where someone was actually, killed in some of these protests. So it was a time in which I think we understood that words had power. What was particularly difficult for me about the situation was, as an administrator, I was trying to figure out the correct administrative position, think about the safety of my institution, but also think about the context of freedom of speech. And the faculty thought very strongly that I needed to take the view to support freedom of speech. End of story. It was a very, very difficult time because I realized that most of the time, as an administrator and as a Black administrator, I felt as though I had the high moral ground. And this was a time when my faculty was at least sharing with me that they didn't think I had the moral high ground on this. And it was hard to be in that situation. And so when I was thinking about how challenging that situation was, then I said, how did I get through it? Because it was a time that I can assure you was much more challenging than these times of COVID. I felt in some ways in COVID, people felt like they were coming together, and at least often at the beginning, there was a common enemy, and it was the virus. But this was something that really split our campus. But the things that really helped me and offered me resilience was absolutely fellow presidents that I could speak to, share my concerns with, and get a reality check. Was I doing it correctly? Was I not? Did I need to pivot? So without doubt, having the support of others who are also in these lonely positions as president. But the second thing that I did was I started writing about it. And probably I had to burn a lot of what I wrote about. It should never see the light of day. But I turned some of my challenges, my frustrations, what I wanted to articulate that I felt that people had shut down and couldn't listen to, I put it in writing. I wrote a couple of pieces on it. I served on panels, had an opportunity to talk about it, rehash it. I still sometimes am asked about the situation. So that was a time when I actually turned to some of my intellectual skills and articulated my point of view in writing. And that helped me think through a very troubling situation a little bit more clearly and understand maybe some of what I did right, some of what I did wrong, and get my point of view out there. There was something about taking that power back and being able to do something myself that was part of my resilience. Thank you.
Well, those are all strong comments, and I feel a little off because while I started in academics and have been commenting on academics and investing and supporting programs in academics, as you know, the last 30 plus years for me were really in government, where I had many challenges similar to those, but not exactly on the same line that you had with an academic institution. So I'll just briefly comment that I agree with what Joanne said. I felt in the times, and believe me, as you probably are aware, maybe if you're not, I don't know why not, that if you're in a leading administrative position in government, you can be caught in some really tough, tight situations. And I always felt that having those that I could call on, and I often say that I call them my mentors, whatever they are, but those who were at similar levels and who had experiences just to discuss what I needed to face and get advice. And I often say many of them are much younger than I am, but they're wiser in other areas. But having Joanne, as you mentioned, other presidents you could get to, I have felt over the years that has been extremely important, and I have advised others to do that. You have to really be secure in what you want to pursue or what you want to do. You need to have the data to back up the reasons why you feel you should move forward in any way that you want to move forward in making decisions or reacting to current situations. You want to have support from others around you so that you're not seen as being dictatorial and just taking your own advice, because if you're being pressured from the outside and pressured from the inside, then you might as well give up. You can't survive. And just having an open mind in these situations. Those are areas that and challenges that I have tried to meet when looking at difficult situations. It probably is a little different for some of you because you've got many other factors, but I think there are some similarities there. And I have to just support what my other panelists have already said, just with those additional comments. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. We've reached the end of our panel. I can tell you that we have been hanging off every word that you have spoken and are just, in awe at your willingness to share at different levels, at the institutional level, but frankly, the personal level, and to make it matter at the personal level for us. So thank you for the quality of your sharing. And thank you to all our panelists. What you shared in those oral histories with Alonzo, I mean, those are treasures. You have given us treasures, and we will be watching them more than once, many times. So thank you for that. So Vivian, Lonnie, Joanne, David, it has been a real honor. And with that, I'll close our second panel for the evening and for the afternoon. And it leaves us only one last thing to do, which is to bring our time together to an appropriate conclusion. And there's one person who is best suited to do that, and it's my honor now to introduce him. I'd like to now introduce one of our trustees, Doug Harris. Doug graduated from Tufts in 1981 and was elected to the Board of Trustees in 2020. He is the founder and CEO of Chicago-based Kaleidoscope Group, a consulting firm specializing in the areas of inclusivity, diversity, cultural change, and organizational development. Doug has over 30 years of experience in the field of diversity and inclusion and is well respected as a subject expert. We are so fortunate that he has brought his expertise to Tufts to help lead this university to a future of continued success. Welcome, Doug. Take us home.
Uh-oh, take us home. That sounds a little scary. Yeah, this has been a great day, to just listen. And I've always had pride in being a member of the Tufts community, and this enhanced that greatly. So often when we get together and we talk about the experience of Black, especially as a diversity consultant, it's the challenges, it's the problems. And we really talked about the greatness today. And that's just inspiring around, yeah, there's challenges. Your last question, we've all faced them, but we're powerful. And this was exhibited, and we stand on the shoulders of that power. So I just want to say thank you for those who organized it, the presenters, the panelists. It's been a great day. And hopefully all of us learned something that will inspire us to keep that momentum going, because we're standing on a great legacy. The other point I'd like to say is, I just love being Black. I just love being Black. And so often this world can make you feel like you're less than when you're Black, but moments like this make me love it even more. And because I love being Black, I love other people being themselves. And many times if we don't love who we are, we'll find ourselves having problems with other people. And so when you see this and you see the greatness, walk through the world in a way where you can make a difference, just like was made before us. Someone had sent me a quote today. It said, "The sun does not ask permission to shine, and neither do I." So the reality, let's shine. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's continue to make a difference. I've been on the board a little over a year now. I want to make a comment around our president, Tony. He's leaving us soon, but he's been extremely committed to this work. And as a diversity consultant, I spend a lot of times with executives around this topic. And I see them get in front of the organizations and make great speeches. But when they get to the board meeting, they kind of slow it down a little bit. They're not as strong. And I've seen him in several meetings stand up very strongly for this effort of anti-racism, fairness, and equity for everyone. And he does it with humility. And so I just want to say I appreciate you standing in that way. And as you move on If I'm on the board still, which I plan to be, I'll be standing as well, continuing to push this effort forward. And we push it because it makes the whole institution great. It doesn't just make the life experience of Black people great, but when we do this well, it makes the entire institution more powerful. A few words stand out for me as you all spoke. One was humility. Very important that as we do this work, we have a humble spirit as we approach it. The second word is unselfish. Everyone spoke about people having looked out for them. One of the terms I hate is self-esteem, because we've all been esteemed. People have been blowing in our backs all our lives. So that self-esteem stuff, I don't believe it. We're standing on people. Each of you said there were people who were there for you. Now it's time to be there for someone else. And then the third word that stands out for me is courage. It's not easy sometimes to be different and make statements around things that need to change when you're up against others. And then the last word y'all snuck in there, which is my favorite word in the world, is love. You know, we don't need actions, we need love. If your heart is right, your actions and your mouth will be right. I got a new podcast coming out called The Corner, and it's on the corner of truth and love. And that's what we need more of to move the world forward. So I am excited to be a part of this. I didn't know what I was going to hear. I didn't even leave my chair. I sat here the whole time. I never did that before. I sat here the whole time just to be a part of this. And I just want to thank all of you and Chris and Katrina. And I know Katrina gonna call me later on tonight. Wait till Monday, Katrina, don't call me tonight. Wait till Monday and see what else we do. But her commitment to this whole effort and everything, and her ability to listen and involve people. Many of you mentioned the fact we're good by ourselves, but we're great together. We are going to be continuing conversations. I'm helping to lead an effort of how do we continue to come together as ex-alumni, faculty, staff, to continue to make Tufts an even greater institution. I love Tufts, it's a great institution, but we can make it even greater as we can continue to put these type of efforts together. So thank you for putting me on here to do a small closing. Thank all of you all who have participated. I got a Hartford connection. I will be coming to see. Now, don't act like you don't know me when I come down there to see. You're going to remember me, John. Don't act like you. I'm going to come right in your office. They're going to say, she got a meeting. I said, no, she don't. I'm coming in to see her. But thank all of you for participating. Your words were great. This effort was great. Chris and Katrina, keep the great work up, and we'll be behind you and in front of you as necessary to keep this movement going. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Doug. And you know you have a special place in my heart. So I will not call you tonight, but the call is coming. And I'd also like to thank you for all of the people who are online and who are in ASEAN for your support of this effort. And finally, I'd like to thank Chris and Alonzo for your partnership, the late night phone calls and Zoom meetings to bring Leading While Black to everyone today. I'd also like to have a special thanks to the Leading While Black Committee and the many areas of the university who supported this effort. We had a wonderful time building this project together, and we could not have done it without the project team. And we want to make sure that you know we won't be having our twice a week meetings, but we are all together and we are open to helping in any way that we can for our collective effort of moving Tufts forward. We have a lot of work to do, and so let's get to work. Thank you all for all your efforts.